This is Reworking Work, a video series from Quartz where we go deep with senior executives on the inner workings of their companies. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Reworking Work. I'm Anna Oakes, editor at Quartz at Work, and today I'm joined by two awesome individuals from Guild, Kaley Klemp and Rachel Romer. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having us, Anna.
Yeah, could we do a short introduction for both of you? Kaley, would you go first?
I'd be happy to. I am Kaley Klemp. I am the executive coach in residence at Guild Education. I am one of the co-authors of the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, which is the backdrop for many of the tools that we use at Guild. And I've worked with somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 YPO forums. So I spent a lot of time with leaders and helping them have more authentic conversations, bring out the best of themselves, and really excited to bring that insight to Guild.
Thanks, Kaley. And those YPOs are those young professional organizations?
Yes, Young Presidents Organization. So CEOs and presidents of various companies throughout the entire world.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, Rachel, over to you.
Hi, I'm Rachel Romer. I'm CEO and co-founder of Guild. And at Guild, we are focused on unlocking opportunity for the American workforce. And we do so by designing education, skilling, and career mobility solutions for the most marginalized employees so that we can serve every employee. And I'm privileged to work with Kaley on the inner workings of Guild of how do we create opportunity for our employees themselves and run really functional and high-performing teams within the organization.
Yes, for sure. So Rachel, maybe let's start with you. I mean, Kaley, we've introduced you as the executive coach in residence, but let's back up. Why did Guild feel like an executive coach would make a difference?
Yeah, so I've had an executive coach since the day I started Guild. That was the first investment I asked the board to approve. And I was terrified to ask them when we had only raised a tiny bit of capital, but I knew it was going to be critical for me as an unorthodox founder and someone who had never really aspired to be CEO, just aspired to solve problems. And we increasingly added coaches for our various executives. And then at Guild ourselves, we actually employ hundreds of coaches who work with the frontline workforce. But I had this realization in my exec coaching journey that we really needed a head coach. And I often now talk about it in terms of a basketball team, right? You've got folks like Steph Curry and his teammates who actually have individual coaches, much like the classic exec coaching model that we're all familiar with. But the Golden State Warriors also have Steve Kerr, the head coach, who's on the sideline during team practice and helping the team become a better team. And when we think about high-performing teams, that's the model across nearly every sport I know. And somehow we never brought that to the executive suite. And so as I spent more and more time with Kaley, I asked her if she'd be open after a year of consulting with us to actually come in and be formally that head coach, supporting our executive team, joining our regular leadership meetings, giving feedback in the meetings, giving side feedback, the way a coach pulls you aside and whispers in your ear during practice, holding the whistle, though she doesn't have to blow it too often, which is great, and really thinking about our team as not only individual athletes, which is, I think, how executives are often coached, but as a team.
Oh, I love that, Rachel. And so many great roles that the coach is able to play. I love that, holding the whistle. I'm glad you don't have to hold that very often, but everybody needs a whistle once in a while. So
every once in a while.
Yeah. So before we move to Kaley, Rachel, I'm just curious, I know you do this for your clients as well, but maybe just talk about those inner workings of the organization, your culture that you're building for your employees. How does this role fit into Guild's larger focus on coaching for them?
Yeah, so at Guild, there are 3 tools we use to help folks unlock opportunity for themselves in their careers. The first is obviously skilling, and that we do day to day. And, we do that internally, and then that's really the core product that got us going, was offering education to the frontline workforce in the form of degrees and certificates, but also high school completion and people management and digital advertising. But skilling is the core, and you have to have the wraparound no matter where you are in your career. We think of 2 of the most fundamental additions beyond skilling as occupational identity and social capital. And when you think about how you build your identity as a leader, that matters for a cashier who we serve at a Walmart or a Chipotle. It matters for a leader of a call center team who's managing a team of 8. But it also mattered for me as a founder who was trying to figure out, how do I become a CEO of a 200-person company, and then a 700-person, and now a 1,300-person organization that's serving millions? And so I think coaching can play such a critical role in being sometimes a window and then sometimes a great mirror, helping you identify and develop. And so Kaley's truly the world's best at this. I've had the privilege of meeting lots of coaches, and I feel so grateful that she's been willing to work with me and now spread it. But we wanted a harmonious methodology within Guild. So not only does Kaley work with the leadership team, but she actually coaches our L&D team on how they build our coaching capabilities within Guild and how we support all of our leaders, managers, and employees. And then we're figuring out how to infuse that into how we support the 5 million Americans that have access to Guild's platform today.
Kaley, let's go over to you and talk about the coaching. So now, how long have you been doing it? And let's talk about one of your favorite things about doing this coaching.
I have been an executive coach for nearly 20 years now, which is a really exciting milestone just to see how much I've gotten to experience. And there are so many different pieces of coaching that I love. Some are getting to see the tools in action. Certainly that moment of an aha where someone has been doing something that perhaps got them to this point, and then they're realizing that's not actually going to let me be the leader at the next level or inspire followership in my team. And being able to hold that mirror or help them see a blind spot and then watching them adjust real time and experience the next level results. So much fun.
That's so great. And Rachel, I'll let you brag on Kaley for a minute. You know, you've mentioned she's one of the best coaches, but what was it about Kaley that said, this is the one that we're going to emulate? This is the one we're going to follow.
Yeah, so Kaley's an expert in small group dynamics and leadership development. And when I think about what a high-performing team looks like, you need that intrapersonal mindset of yourself as a leader, which I think is already very difficult to do, but at least what many executive coaches are focused on. And then you need that element of how to build a high-performing team that I think is more often embedded in sports and other team dynamics, and so often isn't a part of a leadership structure and cadence. And it was something that I was yearning for, but with no concept of how to do it, because I've only been on the one executive team that I happened to build at Guild in the course of my career. And so I needed an expert who had seen lots of high-performing teams, but also would approach it from a way that felt familiar. And what I mean by that is I often joke that in my career, I had to like take off the girl boss blazer because early on as a founder and CEO, I felt like all of the advice I was getting was sort of the HBR, like act more like the prior CEOs. And it always felt like a blazer that didn't fit. And Kaley should share more about it, but the concepts around conscious leadership, the book she co-authored, and then the practice she's built over the last 20 years really felt more like the sweaters I wear every day and felt like something that I could authentically lead from.
I love that. Kaley, let's have you give some commentary, because I mean, this is really around that 7 practice framework. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So as Rachel's describing, one of the things that I love about conscious leadership is that it asks you to be the best version of yourself. It does not ask you to be someone else. And the entire framework is built around this simple idea of a line and what's possible when you're above the line versus what's not possible when you're below the line. And what I love about that is the simplicity and how easily it scales through an organization to have the shorthand of where are you? And have it okay to be able to say, I'm below the line right now, because only through the awareness of knowing where I am are more choices available. As we're striving to spend more and more time above the line, some of the qualities that we start to embody are curiosity. And not just curiosity in, let me get curious about the answer to this problem, but curiosity about myself and how I'm contributing to this dynamic. And as I'm curious about that, I start to take responsibility. Not more responsibility than belongs to me, nor less where I'm blaming or playing the victim, but really threading that needle of what's my part and how do I claim responsibility? And one of the pieces that I love so much about conscious leadership and how it's being used at Guild is that it isn't just an individual question, it really is a collective question. And that as each team member, each leader starts asking questions around what does responsibility look like for me? And they are met with, what does 100% responsibility look like for me? The quality of that conversation is radically different than an individual asking, I wonder what my responsibility is. And the person on the other side going, yeah, you figure that out over there. Similarly, as everyone on the L1, everyone throughout all of Guild is really practicing candor is one of the tools that we're really leaning into right now, which isn't just, is what I'm saying, honest. Is what I'm saying honest? Is what I'm saying complete? Is what I'm saying including self-awareness? And again, as everyone in the room gets committed to that in a meaningful way, the dialogue shifts. And when someone is candid, they are met with curiosity, and it becomes this really beautiful synergistic piece of leadership rather than resistance or defensiveness being on the other side.
Yeah, can we pause here, Kaley? Because there's something, and look, as a former head of people, I'm like so in love with everything that you're saying. I think it's so helpful for an organization, for a single leader, for a team to have this infrastructure of support that you're building. I kind of look at your 7 practice, and maybe somebody who's listening out there who's not as familiar can think about their company's core values, right? That this is, we want to have something we're anchoring on. So maybe they can think about their values. So one of the practice areas that I would love to see every company have a value on, which is about being in the zone, because I think too often, unfortunately, we're zoned out, right? I see employees just giving up their sense of ownership, waiting for the miracle boss that will never come, right? To please you. You have to find that purpose. You have to find that joy in your own work. And so maybe let's pause here and talk about the importance of these like foundational infrastructures like values.
Absolutely. So I think values is a way that you can start to point to it. Specifically in conscious leadership, when we talk about being in the zone, we're talking about the zone of genius, which is a concept I learned from Gay Hendricks. And what he distinguishes is you can spend time in your zone of incompetence where you're not good at it and you don't like it. Hopefully it's more and more rare that people are spending time there. Competence, which is you can do it, but someone can likely do it better. Excellence, which is where you are likely better than most at whatever this activity, this task, this concept might be, but it is energetically very expensive for you to be engaged with it. And then what we strive for at Guild and in the zone of genius is when you're doing something that taps your unique giftedness and it is energy and life affirming. What's really powerful, I think, in what you're describing is that one, it requires some self-inquiry. What is it that really lights me up, where I love what I'm doing and I'm good at it? And it's supported by an environment where there's that complementarity and curiosity. So do I know what it is? And does my team know what that is? Because I think it's really easy without that reciprocal conversation to assume, well, if what I'm doing isn't hard, and if it isn't like soul crushing work, then it doesn't count. And that's awful, my judgment. And instead, if we could say, wait, you love doing that thing's really hard for me. Can we somehow create an experience where both of us are doing things that we love and are really good at? It creates a team that performs at a much higher level than each person trying to do everything, particularly those things that they're not good at and or that are really energetically and emotionally expensive.
Love that. I think that's powerful. Rachel, what does the framework mean for you?
Oh gosh, it means so many things. I think about it as the infrastructure that sits beneath our values, that sit beneath our mission and then our vision. And so they were the missing piece in large part that I was looking for in earlier years of my leadership journey. And just so personally, I think it's also helped me counter a lot of narratives. So let's use zone of genius, for example. When you're in an early stage, I should speak for myself. When I was in the early stages starting the company, I was in scarcity mindset a lot as a leader. Like, you don't know if you're going to make next month, next quarter. You don't know if you're going to make payroll. You don't know if the next client's going to come, if you're going to be able to survive as a company. And when you're in that mindset of scarcity, you spend a lot of time in your zone of competence and your zone of excellence. And then as we had grown as a company, I had held on to a lot of those responsibilities that weren't my zone of genius. But I felt like, one, the board might disapprove of me if I stopped doing those things. Two, that maybe I wouldn't be an official CEO. I wouldn't be doing the CEO job description if I let go of some of those things. Like, I have these stories and all these shoulds. And the more I started letting go of that, the easier it has become for me to hire outstanding leaders onto our leadership team. And the work's not done, but those types of frameworks are what allow you to shift how you want to think about your work, especially for those of us who are realizing, like, gosh, we're not going to play one playbook in our career. This is an ever going, ever evolving process. And so having these undergirding frameworks and philosophies can be those, like, the partner you need along the way.
Oh, I love that. The partner you need along the way. So Kaley, let's talk about first on your level. What does your role look like? Rachel mentioned a few things, but how are you really, we're not calling you a tool, but how are you used every day to make a difference?
I'd like to think of myself as a Swiss Army knife if I'm going to be a tool. So regularly, I am engaged with the L1, which is sort of that C-suite leadership team at Guild. And part of the rationale for being engaged with that team is that I believe coaches are everywhere, and that it's important that characteristics and values that you want modeled are really happening, in particular at the highest leadership of an organization. The people will look up for an authenticity check. Is the CEO also being coached? Is she calling herself out when she's not being candid? When she gets feedback, does she listen? Is she curious, or does she get sort of special treatment? And as everyone on the L1 is practicing and their teams are witnessing that, there's much more willingness to lean in. So I think the time with individuals on the L1 and that team dynamic is invaluable. Then I'm also spending time coaching the coaches. So just today, we had our monthly meeting where all of the coaches from the outside focused on conscious leadership who are engaged with the leaders at Guild. We have a monthly call. What are we learning? How are we honing our own craft? Any themes that we're seeing where we want to bring our best collectively to each other? We've got a running list of places where people are stuck and could use coaching from other coaches, or thematic conversations. Really striving as the head coach to ensure that all of the individual coaches are aligned, that we've got a similar game plan for how we're going to win whatever trophy it is this season, if we want to keep our sports metaphor. And then the last thing that I think is so important is I'm teaming with Terrence Cummings, who's the Chief Opportunity Officer at Guild. And he is helping. Rachel, you should brag on Terrence, because I don't even know the half of what he has done. And he is an incredible human. And part of that partnership is helping ensure that we embody throughout Guild and infuse coaching at all levels of the organization. So it isn't just for the SVPs or for the L1. It isn't just for folks outside. That coaching is really, it's a core value, a core belief that's being included everywhere.
That's great. And I want, the people who are listening out there who aren't in a coaching organization like yours, maybe they sell widgets, right? Okay, whatever. But they're excited about the idea of having on-site coaches. I mean, that is where I want people to pay attention and not lose that this can start small and maybe scale its way up. Do you have any advice on that, Kaley or Rachel?
I do. I think that you're pointing to something essential, that one of the old stories that I think used to exist is that you can either be a coach or you can be a human in an organization that, in this case, will have make widgets, right? That you can be the manager, or, sorry, friend, you have to leave your organization to go be a coach outside. And I love that we're debunking that myth, because I think there's something so incredibly powerful to the ability to lead or to manage like a coach. I believe this so strongly. We are bringing this everywhere at Guild. One of my colleagues, Suhail Runner, and we have an entire coaching program called the Coaching Certification for Business Leaders. And the requirement is you can't leave your job. Not that you can't ever, but stay the CFO, stay the VP of finance, stay a marketing individual contributor, but stay that leader and do that job as a coach so that they aren't divorced from each other, but rather are fully integrated.
And Anna, my answer to that question would be to think about scale and impact. I think a lot of companies, in fact, I've heard of one here in Denver that was just grappling with this. They went and hired executive coaches for every member of the leadership team, but none of those coaches know each other, right? Because lots of coaches operate sole practitionerships. And it turns out like it isn't really working because it's like they're all going to different calculus classes and they're all showing up having learned calculus in different languages. And so that's really complicated. And so I think companies who are resource constrained on this and for whom this isn't core and centric to their mission can still invest in coaching by being purposeful and actually thinking differently. Maybe you hire that team coach first. You invest in offsites and facilitation and shared common language and frameworks for the leadership team. And then you scale from there rather than hiring 10 individual coaches and hoping that it strikes magic.
Oh, I think that's great advice. Great advice. I want to give everybody an example or two, if we could, of what real-time coaching looks like, because I think people are probably imagining like the hook coming in and like dragging you away. Let's talk about what that looks like. And again, maybe how we can borrow some of these behaviors.
Yeah, so I'll keep running with the sports analogy because I actually think it really helps and it helps demystify some of this. So Kaley regularly joins my leadership team meetings and she gives constructive and positive feedback in real time. And both are actually really important, especially amongst high performing execs who don't always give each other compliments. So for example, she knows all of our learning goals. We know each other's. In fact, they're on a doc that we all update every week that kicks off the meeting. But Kaley will coach us, for example, to up level a conversation. She'll check if we have a member of our team who's working on candor right now, and she'll commend that person when they say, oh, I need to share something that I wasn't gonna share, but I'm really worried that, and Kaley will, say in the chat, it's something as simple as like, hey, nice job. Like, I imagine that was brave for you to share that insight. Or if we have somebody who's focused on listening, Kaley might chat on the side privately and say like, hey, noticing you're talking a lot today. Are you feeling activated, or what's holding you back from listening? So it can happen both in public and in private. And it's kind of cool given like we all hated Zoom meetings. We all still kind of hate Zoom meetings, but coaching actually works even better in a Zoom meeting than it does in person because you have multimodal ways to receive coaching.
I love that. It's true. I'm the most active person in the everyone chat. I'm the most active person in the direct message chat. And one of the ways that I feel like I know it's really working is that I'll start to hear people say to each other, hey, I'm going to channel my coach. Or occasionally they'll be like, so what Kaley would say right now is, and then they'll say exactly what I was thinking or what I was privately chatting someone along the lines of, hey, we've been in this conversation for a while. Are we answering the question that we set out to answer? And are we clear about what our next steps are? And do we have a clean agreement, which is code for us that has a whole language behind it? Do we know who is going to do what, by when, at what level of fidelity? Are we clear who has decision rights and who's coming back with those next steps? And by having that shared vocabulary where we can say, do we have a clean agreement here? And everyone can just check. Oh, wait a second. We don't know. Are we coming back at 30% baked or are we coming back at 90% baked? And we can check in with each other around that. It's one of the ways that I think it shows in real time that people are engaging. Similarly, I love it when people in the meeting will catch themselves some version of, so I'm below the line right now. And what they're saying is, I'm caught in scarcity thinking, or I'm feeling defensive, or I put 100 hours of work into this document and I'm feeling really attached to the conclusion I came to, and I'm not actually receiving feedback very well. Anytime that happens, the whole room exhales. because that person has revealed what's going on, and it gives everyone a chance to shift gears and come back to it. Do we want to stay where we were? Is that productive? Or do we want to come at it from a different dimension? That might be sort of using Rachel's like, well, tweet the whistle. Do it like, take 5, get some water, then let's come back and run that drill again.
And like, you notice she's using all practice language. I don't think we talk about practice enough in business. There's this expectation that like we're all supposed to show up and be perfect at attending meetings and making those meetings productive and making them lead to the right decisions. And it's all IQ, like it's all above in the brain. And we learned it all in school. And I think so much of what we try and use conscious leadership to do is to like get out of that purely heady space and actually see like, how are people feeling? What are your physical sensations? What's the data going on? Because like at the end of the day, we're also still mammals, just like showing up in suits, trying to do this right. And so being real about what's going on really has helped facilitate a more high-performing team.
And building on what you're saying, Rachel, I love that so much. I think sometimes it's easy to forget emotions are also data. And so if I skip all the information that's happening in my body, if I skip all the information that's happening through my emotions, I've actually become pretty myopic in the way that I'm perceiving the world. And it's much less likely that I'm going to catch something new and be able to innovate or be creative or even see around the corner that we all are trying to use our brains for, only with half of our potential intelligence.
Yeah, and there's so much potential in what you both are talking about. I think one real aspect I want to call out is especially when I'll call you another, not a tool this time, but I'll call you the hub in the middle of a wheel, Kaley.
Oh, I like it. I get all kinds of identities.
When you are handling all of these individuals and trying to balance confidentiality and respect, can we just call that out here? Because you're making it look really easy. And I know that is a really hard part of the role.
Yeah. I will often say to a person who I am working with, and it will happen, like I'll use Rachel because she's here, that Rachel will ask me a question and I'll say, hey, I am holding that conversation in confidence, and I'm happy to facilitate a conversation between you and that other person. Or I'll direct message that person and say, hey, remember that conversation we were in? Now would be a good time for you to reveal that about yourself. And it's a dance to ensure that I am walking the line where, to me, confidentiality is of utmost importance. It's really a foundation of trust. And I think that there's a point where I will push a person, but never to the point where they over reveal. And then there's almost a hesitancy where it undermines that psychological safety.
Yeah.
I think, what I've seen, having tried on lots of different coaching methodologies in my close to decade of a weekly practice around this, is that somewhere along the way, coaching became, especially in, I think, high growth companies or in corporations, a tool for judgment. Let's help the board have data on how this person is doing, or let's help the CEO evaluate their team. We've done a lot of work to say that Kaley, the conscious leadership work, and all of our coaches are not in that judgment role. And I think that's a real shift you have to think about. It's actually not to say that other type doesn't have a place and a time, but I'm not sure that's coaching. I think that's evaluations or formal 360s, and you need to call it what it is. If you're going to call it coaching, it actually needs to start and end with the person in mind and their goals for their development.
Woo, I love it. I love it. I can tell how passionate you are, both of you, on this topic, and it makes me so happy. Let's round this out with advice for the individual leader who's in an organization. We've been talking a lot about a coaching mindset and, everybody having this sort of coaching mentality for their own career. What can someone do to start improving their coaching mindset? Kaley, why don't we start with you?
I think the first is recognizing whether they want to learn and grow or whether they don't. And to make it okay if a person says, I'm not interested in growing, I'm not interested in development, I am interested in staying exactly where I am. Because only by accepting that it doesn't have to be growth can a person then opt in. Once a person is opted in, and I think that's who the question is really for, then it is recognizing that every experience is an opportunity for learning and growing. That it isn't this is limited to the 1 hour a week that you're in one-on-one conversation with your coach. Nor is it like, wait until the coach is in the room before you do any learning here. It's every experience. Life is giving you feedback. And when you put on the glasses of what's in here for me, and it builds on curiosity, it builds on self-awareness, it builds on striving to be in a different spot tomorrow than I am today. I think all of that gets blended together into letting people not have to wait for something external, but foster it for themselves.
I can add, because Kaley won't say this, but I mean, I recommend 15 commitments of conscious leadership to everyone, because, and we say this at Guild a lot, but leadership and management starts with self-leadership and self-management. How do you manage yourself? And so much of this is learning how to manage your emotions and emotional regulation, learning how to manage your time and your expectations of yourself and, whatever stories you tell. So I think there's actually so much people can do, even if their company isn't able to financially invest in them having a coach, because there's actually a lot of self-coaching that's really available today, and that can really give you a leapfrog into the work.
Yeah, there are a lot of free and no cost tools out there, right? Or low cost, I should say, free and low cost tools out there to help you on that journey. And I'll talk about it all the time. Cornell University did that study of the #1 predictor of success for CEOs. And it wasn't strategery and it wasn't, executive presence. It was self-awareness. It was, how well do I know what I'm really great at and what I'm not, and how well can I, work with people around me to highlight their strengths too. So I think it's so powerful what you're both doing.
You're watching us voraciously nod our heads, because Kaley and I both have introduced self-awareness as the key thing we interview for, because it's become the key predictor for not only hopefully the work I'm doing, but we actually want it to be a key facet of every leader that we hire onto the Guild team. So it's the top competency we interview for.
Oh, I'm with you, Rachel. We called it the meta awareness is the meta skill for 2023. If that's where we can spend time. Self-awareness leads to other awareness, which leads to organizational awareness. And you all are rolling up your sleeves and getting that done with internal to Guild. And I'm really happy to have had this time with you. And thank you so much for the work and for helping us rework work.
Thanks for having us.
What a great conversation.
Of course, wishing everybody peace and progress.